Gear Tasting Radio is brought to you by Imminent Threat Solutions. ITS provides knowledge that empowers individuals with indispensable skill sets to explore the world and prevail against all threats. Right now, as a special thank you for all podcast listeners, we're offering 10% off in the ITS store. Simply use the code GTR to save 10% at store.itstactical.com. Welcome to Gear Tasting Radio, where we offer you an in-depth look into the usage and philosophy behind the equipment in our lives. I am joined, as always, by Rob Henderson,
Hello.
and I am Brian Black. I didn't even give you a chance to say
No, you're good.
hello.
I got it in there.
Hello.
Snuck it in.
Anyway, today we are going to be talking about ARs. So, if you've ever shot an AR-15 or anything like an AR-15 clone on the platform, you'll kind of understand what we're talking about, but I'm going to try to break down stuff for even those that might not have ever shot an AR-15 before. So
Yeah, the big scary guns.
Yeah, the black rifles.
MSR. That's its official designation.
What's MSR?
Modern Sporting Rifle.
Oh, yes.
I hate that term.
Is that an NRA made up
No, I think it's like a
designation?
legislation type thing. It's like when they... Because first and foremost, if you live in California, you can just turn this off right now. Because zero of this applies to you.
That's very true.
Nothing applies to you on this.
Yeah, your rights have been pretty much stripped away when it comes to
Yeah.
scary black rifles
You guys
in
are done.
California. Yeah. So that's maybe a reason why you might want to move out of California. Maybe it's not.
Maybe
But,
not.
Yeah, they've got a lot of restrictions on... I can't even keep up with it now because there's been so many that have passed recently.
Yep.
Matt Sharp wrote a great article on it. We should... you
Yeah.
know, if you're in California and you want a good guide on what you can and can't do, we've got a really good article that one of our contributors, Matt Sharp, who lives in California, hopefully not much
too much
longer. But he wrote it, and it's a really good wrap-up of all the California compliance laws that you have to follow if you want to own an AR-15
Yep.
in California. For the rest of America,
Yeah.
that's what we're going to be kind of focusing on is the different aspects of owning an AR-15 and some of the hows and whys. And I really kind of want to hit the repair angle, too, because... so here's my beef. I love AR-15s, but... I will always default to the AK and the AK-47 type variant of being one of the most bomb-proof service rifles out there. Not only do you have better ballistics with the 7.62 round that it fires, but you're going to be hard-pressed to ever break one in terms of, like, unless you've put it together yourself and you did things the wrong way and like your rivets are coming out because you didn't know how to press them with the proper press. That's, you know, short of those kind of issues, buying a fairly good quality AK, in my opinion, can somewhat be a better investment than the AR platform.
I mean, they got guys in the pictures of guys in Africa running AKs with shovels for stocks.
Right.
You know, I mean, it's a gun that will run regardless of pretty much anything.
And the history of the AR is really, it's kind of interesting to read on, too. And I've written some articles on ITS about the history and things like that and how it kind of came around as, I guess, actually, the Krinkov, or the Krink in Russia kind of came about because of actually, was it the U.S. wanting a 5.45-like version that created the
Didn't
M16?
they find the Krink on a
did.
fallen officer, and that's
Yeah.
how they discovered it?
I just can't remember. It's the chicken and the egg thing. I
Right,
can't remember
yeah.
if the
Which
Krink came
came first, sure.
before the AR. I think it did. It had to have. And maybe that's where the U.S. got that idea of creating the 5.45 platform was based on kind of the Russian lightweight tech that the Krinkovs had. So running 5.45 in those. But anyway,
Enough AK talk.
Yeah, sorry.
Love to the motherland.
Yeah, this is about ARs, obviously. But it is some interesting stuff, and if you're interested in learning more about it, we'll put some stuff in the episode intel as well. There's lots of articles to link to in the episode intel for this particular episode of Gear Tasting Radio. But my experience with the AR platform dates back to, I don't know, 2000. I think, honestly, now that I think about it, more like 2005 is probably when I got into ARs, maybe 2006.
I was going to say, I think most people start around 2004 because that was the lift of the assault weapons ban. So you either had experience prior, or then like I think the market started to pick up.
And I remember back in 2004 staring at one on the wall that you couldn't have at one of the gun shops locally in Fort Worth there. So yeah, I do remember that changeover of when you could start owning things like that. So I didn't jump into it right away, but it was probably like a year after that probably kicked in, because that was around the time 5, 6 in there that I was getting out of the military. So that's when I kind of had the resources to now own one of those. I didn't have one before I went into the service. But so I still consider myself, even after working on ARs, and I mean working on them, I've probably been working on them for about a decade.
Yeah.
And I'd still kind of consider myself an amateur armorer. I don't really feel I can definitely put one together like nobody's business, but I still think there's lots more to learn on the platform, even though I know how to diagnose most issues and know about most of the malfunctions and how to treat them and things like that and what to replace because of lessons learned.
Yep.
I do feel like there's still probably tons that I don't know, so I don't really consider myself anything more than an amateur at this point, but I do really like tinkering with them and working on them.
Sure.
And that's one of the big benefits that I can see in them is it kind of allows you that platform to work on.
Yeah, it's super modular.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's one of the, I would say, one of the most modular weapons platforms out there.
Definitely.
Just in terms of what you can do to it. And replaceability of parts, too, if you're talking about direct impingement systems.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we should probably start, is talking a little bit about that, too. So DI versus piston-driven guns are really the two classifications of AR-15. So direct impingement is meaning the cycling system that is performing the operation when you're firing the gun. So the gas actually comes back through a gas tube into the upper receiver, which pushes the bolt carrier group to the rear.
So it's the gas directly pushing the carrier.
Yeah. And then it cycles back and loads around and, so on and so forth. And that's the rudimentary explanation, obviously. But with a piston-driven gun, that gas is ejected out of the front of the rifle, and it's pushing a piston back into the upper receiver rather than the gas itself, if that makes sense. So basically that piston is performing the cycling operation that the gas normally would in driving that bolt carrier group to the rear. It's actually done with a piston, so it keeps the upper receiver cleaner. That's the benefit in running a piston-driven gun. And I've got both, but my beef with piston-driven guns is that those parts are proprietary. So meaning you can't just pick up any part.
You can't swap it.
Right. Whereas the direct impingement system of ARs, everything is pretty much modular. You'd be hard-pressed to find anything that's not interchangeable. Now, newer rifles are coming out to where they've changed the lower receiver, and now you've got different functionality.
People are starting to get fancy.
Yep. And we've talked about that before on the regular gear tasting video stuff. With like the Radian rifle we reviewed a while back. So that's kind of just a rough explanation of the different classifications, I guess, of ARs. But it comes back to just an enjoyment from working on things. If you like DIY projects and you like working on things, you might really like the AR platform if you're not already involved in it.
I definitely think so.
And that's not saying that they're going to break so much that you have to love working on them. That's really not what it is.
Yep.
There's obviously service life capability with all the parts that are on ARs. I don't know if AKs really have a service life on their parts, but
yeah, and I mean I've seen a lot of ARs run even past the recommended.
Yeah.
But I mean we're talking thousands of rounds.
Yeah.
This isn't like shoot a couple hundred and then have to replace big parts.
And so even though the AK platform doesn't have a lot of failures and stuff like that, it is also a piston-driven platform too. It's not direct impingement. So there is technically proprietary parts when it comes to the AK platform. When you talk about different variants of AKs and things like that, the parts aren't interchangeable like they are on a standard AR direct impingement system, but again, they
a little more ubiquitous.
Yeah, you may not have to do anything for change out anyway. So,
well, one of the things I see people talk about a lot is they want to buy one versus they want to build one.
Yeah,
and so one of the problems I see people fall into a lot, and I've had several friends do this, is they'll go buy a standard AR, and usually that's going to be a 16-inch barrel with the plastic handguards, like the carbine length gas system, and they buy it, and then they decide, you know what, I don't really like these handguards. I'm going to look for something else, and they get the Magpul ones, or they get a quad rail, or they do something, and then it's like, oh, I don't really like this stock, and then pretty soon you've put at least the value of the gun back into it, where you could have just built your own for much cheaper, and then had exactly the pieces that you want.
I agree, and I don't know if there's any way to really prevent that. I mean, it's one of those kind of teenager life lessons. Like, you can tell them all you want until you're blue in the face, but they're going to do what they want to do and learn in their own way.
And that's fine. Everybody has a bin full of standardized AR parts.
I say that because I've been there.
Yeah.
Not because I had a friend kind of telling me what to do, but I just bought an AR, and, you know, I guess, I don't know if it's luckily or whether, I don't know, maybe I did some more research, but that piston-driven gun, which is a POF, was my first AR.
Nice.
So I actually had a piston AR for the first. It was it's still heavy as shit. I still have it, and it's tremendously heavy.
Yeah. Heavy is reliable.
Yeah, heavy is reliable. You want heavy. But you know, future purchases led me to LWRC as well, and I think that I don't know if it was a cost thing. I couldn't afford it at the time, but anyway, I have an LWRC upper, and it's much lighter than the POF upper and stuff like that. So I wouldn't say that all piston-driven ARs are heavy, but that's definitely a consideration you want to keep in mind when you're making a purchase.
Well, and I think one of the most important things too to consider, especially if it's going to be your only AR, is the AR-15 is already a carbine length system. So like the original M16 was it 20 inches? I think that was originally a 20-inch barrel. So the cartridge is designed to fire out of a 20-inch barrel. So when you start shrinking it, you know, there are a lot of people that have like 7.5-inch AR-15s, and the ballistics on that is just like not worth much after like 50 to 100 yards.
Well, yeah, and that's an important consideration we should probably address. So it's really, you're obviously going to lose velocity as you go shorter with the barrel. So shorter barrel guns, while they may look cool, are really only effective when you get so small like that for, you know, room clearing or something like that. And it can be a dangerous balance too, because now you're firing a 5.56 round indoors through walls,
so
and
loud.
it's, even though the velocity is reduced, it's still going to travel through walls and things like that too. So there's considerations to keep in mind there. You know, a lot of people are quick to say, "Oh, I got an AR by the bed." Well, okay,
right.
Just understand that when you fire that 5.56 round, especially if you've got a, you know, traditional 16-inch barrel, that round could potentially go through your house and into another one.
Oh,
so,
yeah. I mean, 5.56's whole thing is penetration. It's really good at penetrating.
So it's just something to keep in mind. I won't really harp on that.
And so you built in your DIY build a 14.5-inch barrel.
I did.
With the pin. And so that brings it to...
a pin flash hider.
Yeah, so that brings it to 16 inches. Or I think it's 16.1, right?
Yeah, and it's legal if you permanently attach it, which I did. So I had a pin that was welded into the flash hider. So basically we drilled a hole, you know, into the threaded portion of the barrel
and
welded it together so that it's, you know, unremovable.
Not going anywhere.
Yeah, and that classifies it as a 16 overall because it can include the flash hider. Yeah,
Gotcha.
It's a permanent attachment.
So for people that aren't familiar, if you have it under 16 inches, you have to register that as a short-barreled rifle. And there's a tax stamp, and you do paperwork, and you have to wait a while. So we have another article of like building a short barrel rifle that we can link to that it kind of explains some of the legalities.
We've got many articles on ARs, and I'm just realizing that as we sit here and talk about it, like pretty much every subject that we're talking about, we'll be able to leave some episode intel, so we won't really spend too much time on it. But just know that when you start messing around with the AR platform and you go short in certain areas and your length changes or something like that, you could potentially cross a line into having to purchase a $200 tax stamp. So having to pay the government $200 for their time of filling out a form or looking at your form.
That's it. It's just like, look.
And literally putting a stamp on there and stamping it is, it's
very expensive stamps.
It's kind of ridiculous, those that like paying for stamps are sometimes called stamp collectors.
Yep.
I've got a few myself, but anyway, so the AR-15 platform as a whole, I think, is very reliable. There are some things that I'd like to mention to look for if you are kind of in the market for an AR platform gun. So, and I'm not purposely going to discount manufacturers that are, reputable manufacturers. What I want to focus on is who to go to for kind of the bare bones direct impingement system, standard AR quality parts.
Yep.
So I won't specifically mention companies like Radian and things like that are kind of thinking outside the box and developing new features, because I really want to focus on the user market that wants something reliable but is still inexpensive. So, baseline AR-15, direct impingement system, where do they go? What can they look for?
Yep.
That type of stuff. So, in my opinion, I think Bravo Company is one of the best bangs for the buck out there in terms of their parts.
Yeah.
My first class that I ever did when I started getting into training post-military was a Pat Rogers class, and this was 2008. And Pat is no longer with us. I wish he was. He was a phenomenal instructor. So if you're listening to this and you had the chance to train with Pat, you'll know what I'm talking about. He was one in a million when it comes to instructors, and I learned a ton from him just even in the one class that I took from him. I always wanted to go back, and I just never did, and I regret that. I really wish that I would have trained more with Pat, but just in that 2 or 3 day class, I can't remember what it was, I think it was a 2 day class, I learned so much about the AR platform and how to fire it properly and all that good stuff. I learned more from Pat than I did in the military about stuff like that. So, another thing I picked up during that class, and where I was going with that is that Pat, was just pushing Bravo Company hard, meaning he was touting their production process and talking about the whys of, magnetical particle testing and things like that. So the procedures that Bravo Company was following at the time were very, I'd call them industry leading, honestly. They were doing stuff that not a lot of manufacturers were doing at the time because Paul over there was interested in producing quality stuff, and he wanted people to know that. So the second class I took was a class from a guy named Dean Caputo, who taught an AR armorer's class, and that was one of the best things that I think I could have done at the time, because now taking the foundation of Pat's class and how to shoot, now I took a class on how to actually work on them too.
And get the mechanics of the gun down.
Yeah, exactly. So that was a phenomenal class to take too. And then I kind of learned more about magnetical particle testing and why it's important, and to look for a properly staked gas carrier and that type of stuff. So those are features that I really kind of want to talk about when it comes to Bravo Company stuff, if you're looking for out of the box, ready to go kind of stuff. So you can buy a complete upper from Bravo Company in lots of different configurations, and I don't know if they sell complete lowers or whether everything is stripped and you have to build the lower.
I don't know if they sell lowers themselves. I think they sell mostly parts that go with it.
Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, and because I've only ever done upper stuff through them.
Yeah,
and that can grips and stuff.
I'm sorry, that can be a little confusing. So there's two parts of the AR-15 platform. There's an upper, which contains basically the upper receiver group. So you've got the gas carrier. The bulk carrier group, as well as the charging handle, and basically the bolt group itself is within the bulk carrier group.
Yep.
And then you've got the firing pin and things like that are contained in the upper receiver. The lower receiver is actually the serialized part, which is why it can be difficult to purchase those complete from places too, because that has to ship directly to an FFL, whereas if you're buying an upper receiver and components like that, they can ship directly to your house. You don't need to ship those to an FFL. It's the lower receiver that actually has to be shipped to an FFL. And
just like the metal piece. I mean, even the parts inside the lower, they can ship you all day. It's just that metal piece you got to get through an FFL.
Right. So that's kind of the deal with that. And, with the bolts that Bravo Company sells, they're all magnetical particle tested, high pressure tested. That's the other thing I was trying to think of. So they're marked with like an HP and an MP for magnetical particle testing and high pressure testing. And then when it comes to the gas key, and if you look at a bulk carrier group, the thing that's on the very top of the bulk carrier group that actually, sits inside the upper receiver
and what the actual gas tube pushes into.
Correct. So the gas key mates with that gas that's getting pushed through the system, or the exhaust gas from firing the round gets pushed into that gas key. And if you don't have a proper stake, which means little marks that are on the side of each of the bolts that hold on this gas carrier key, it can actually start to shake loose and move on you, and it can cause malfunction. So one of the things to look for in an AR-15 platform is a properly staked gas key. That can be one of the first indicators of, bad manufacturing or
less than ideal parts.
Yeah, less than ideal parts, exactly. So I recommend Bravo Company just because I trust them. So,
right. I think that's the biggest thing is their reputation.
Yeah. And I know they don't produce anything that's not, meeting their high quality standard. So I would definitely trust them with a lot of my parts too. So
yeah, I love their bolt carrier groups. You can always get those and then just plug and play.
Yeah.
Nothing to worry about.
So, when it comes to that, I do recommend Bravo Company. If you're buying spare parts, which I recommend keeping a lot of spare parts. I'm kind of OCD when it comes to...
Kind of.
Yeah. Okay.
Briefcase full of spare parts.
Yeah. I've literally got a case that I have to work on guns, and it's got tons of spare parts. I've taken a label maker and organized each one of those little compartments of all the AR spare parts. I could probably build 15 ARs with all the spare parts that I have in this case, but... I like to be prepared. I love working on guns, which is why I even have it. So I'll sometimes take that to the range if it's a long range trip or something like that. If it's a quick trip, I won't take that. But if I know there's going to be multiple people there and I've got the chance to help people out with my skills to pay the bills.
And the parts. Some people just don't bring the stuff they need.
Yeah, so a little part like that can sometimes just be all you need to keep shooting that day and not ruin your day. So I'm a big advocate of carrying spare parts.
Absolutely.
And you don't necessarily need a case like that either. I've kind of distilled what you should carry down into kind of the simplest form, in my opinion. So I've got a Magpul grip, and most of these Magpul grips are pretty hollow, They've got a hollow space in them where you can put these inserts from Magpul in them. And one of those is a bolt pin insert, and it's supposed to hold a complete bolt as well as a firing pin. And while I feel that those are two very important parts to replace, I've also included a cam pin as well as a firing pin retaining pin.
So basically, the only thing you need to retain itself is the bolt carrier group, or the bolt carrier. You can replace all the parts on it.
Correct.
Other than the gas key.
Yeah, as long as you have a properly staked gas key, which you should be looking for anyway.
Yeah.
I can pretty much do a complete bolt change.
So the parts I've seen break, I've seen a guy's extractor go down, and that with that bolt, you just swap the bolt, you'd be fine, good to go. So, and I've seen people's firing pins had issues. So, yeah, I think that's a good idea for the full bolt.
And I've also seen extractor issues, so that's why I have a full bolt in here. So, yes, you could carry a spare extractor or a spare extractor spring.
Yeah.
A spare,
by the time you get to those
by the time you do that, it's better and quicker to sometimes just replace the bolt and just be on your way. And the reason I carry the firing pin retaining pin is when you take it out, it can sometimes get lost.
Yeah.
So
it walks off.
Yeah, and same with the cam pin. If you're in a rush and you're trying to swap out a bolt in a bolt carrier group, those are some of the things that could really screw you up if they fall on the ground and get lost. So that's why I have those. It's not necessarily that the firing pin retaining pin is going to go bad or the cam pin is going to go bad. It's that those may drop on the ground and get lost.
Yeah.
So that's
and the BCM bolt carrier groups come with, I don't know what it's called. It's the donut that goes around the spring on the extractor.
Yeah, they've got a gasket and
they're a little beefier.
Yeah, what it's supposed to do is simulate, or it's supposed to fix extractor springs that aren't the proper extractor spring for for that bolt. So what you should be looking for is a brass colored extractor spring that's got a black insert in it. So that's the proper setup for most AR platforms. And if you don't have that, you can get those from, I think Brownell sells them, and same with Bravo Company. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I apologize. That's kind of a specific little part. But just know that in the extractor, when you actually remove the extractor from the bolt itself, sometimes you'll see a little black donut gasket on there. And that's not a necessary part if you have the correct spring and insert matched with that extractor. It can be a problem though if you have a bolt that's subpar, basically. So that's a great thing to carry into the field with you if you know you're going to be using some other AR-15s, to carry some of those with you. So if you have extractor problems, you can fix those in the field. But I just prefer to carry a completely brand new bolt set up like that.
Then it doesn't matter what the problem is.
And it's expensive. I mean, bolts can be $60 to $80 or something like that, depending on where you get them.
Yeah.
But having a spare bolt can be, can definitely pay for itself if you have problems.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're in the middle of a class and it goes down, then you miss out on the rest of that class.
And really, I feel like those are kind of the spare parts that you should carry on a regular basis. I don't think that there's a lot more that could happen. Yes, anything's possible. Your hammer trigger pins could walk if you don't have anti-walk pins in there or something locking them down. I've seen what do you call that? The bolt release be a problem for cycling before. It's not that the gun wouldn't fire, but so what was happening is that, and this was actually on an AR I had, so that bolt release is supposed to, lock the bolt to the rear when the magazine is empty. So what was happening is that it wouldn't lock to the rear, and because of the contour of the ramp that's on there, basically it wasn't holding the bolt.
Gotcha.
And that was a simple issue, which really shouldn't be an issue. It's a training scar, honestly. You should always, tap, rack, bang, that type of thing.
Right.
So,
it's just inconvenient for reloads.
Yeah, when you're reloading, yes, you can come right back to the paddle and slam it home to load a new round if it's properly locked to the rear, but you can also just grab the charging handle. So it depends on your training and what you're.
But that's a great example. Is that doesn't put the gun down in the field.
Correct.
You could still run it. It would suck, but you could do it. Like when the bolt goes down, the gun won't function.
Yeah, and if your hammer and trigger pins walk, that's a no go too. That's that's something that's going to bring the gun down. So that's why I always recommend anti-walk pins on the hammer and trigger, and why I install them on absolutely every gun I build, because I don't ever want to deal with that issue. I've never had it happen, and I haven't heard too many instances of it happening to other people either. But
just the fact that it could,
I just don't want to deal with that. But, yeah. So that's kind of the gist of spare parts and things like that. I also have gotten into ambidextrous stuff recently too, and so there's there's kind of a fine line between modifying the AR platform and not modifying the AR platform. So the benefit in doing that is you can increase the versatility of the platform, but the downside is that now you're building those training scars, so you're used to manipulating a firearm in that configuration. So if you do a battlefield pickup or you use somebody else's AR, you may try to do something that could waste valuable seconds
because you don't have that.
Correct. So, and that's the danger. If you're truly in a firefight with an AR, and you're in that situation, which is few and far between for most of us, but but that's the downside to making those kind of modifications. But I really like the Radian Raptor charging handles that have come out. They used to be AXTS, and they've rebranded to Radian. So if you've heard that company before, AXTS Raptor charging handles, it's now a Radian Raptor charging handle. But I really like what they've done with their ambi charging handles. I like the feel of them. Bravo Company also makes really good ambi charging handles too. But I've just really liked what Radian's done with a lot of their stuff too. So, and then I also usually run an ambi selector switch. So that's kind of how I like doing it. I like to be able to manipulate the gun from both the right or the left. And I still don't have a way to lock the bolt to the rear or basically charge around other than using the charging handle. Without without having a built-in feature like that. So,
I just always wonder, like with yours, the safety's great because if you did have to take it to the left if you were going around a corner or something like that. But I'm not going to be locking the bolt to the rear left-handed. I would rather switch back. And if for some reason something has happened to my right hand, then I wouldn't be two-handed anyway. So it's always like the best parts, like you said, are I think the charging handle and the safety being ambidextrous, not being able to open the bolt.
Yeah, to truly be fully ambidextrous, you should have that. But Yeah, I see what you're saying, and as long as you're training for that type of issue to happen, where potentially can't use a hand or something like that, that's just kind of a built-in training element to if you're advancing your training into that regard.
Yep.
Which I would recommend. I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing that.
Yeah, I always recommend to people, if you're gonna I have $1,500 to spend on an AR. It's like, okay, cool, spend $800 on the AR and $700 on the training.
Right. And that's a very important consideration. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
I highly recommend training.
Oh yeah.
It's some of the best dollars you can spend on any firearm platform.
Absolutely. But and then on the AR, like you said, this is a specialized platform and has a lot of penetration, so you want to be aware of how the gun operates so that you're not surprised in the middle of the night and using the wrong gun.
Yeah, and you don't want to be like one of those people that just carries an AR and has never really shot one before.
Yeah.
That's very dangerous as
Yes,
well. That's
very much so.
That's kind of what everybody deals with on the CCW front too. You've got a lot of people that have licenses to carry, but
they don't shoot.
Don't really shoot or have training. I know even some law enforcement officers are like that, but
yep.
Training and staying proficient with the platform is highly important.
Absolutely.
No matter what you do, because honestly, we talk about ARs, but in a true situation where your AR goes down, you're in some kind of firefight. Hopefully, you have a secondary to transition to, like a pistol or something like that.
Sweet cover.
And that's what you would do first. You wouldn't just stop firing and go, oh crap!
Swap this bolt.
Yeah, let me swap this bolt out. Cover me. That's really not what you should be doing anyway.
Yeah.
So your idea is, or your goal is to get off the X and or return fire first, and anyway. But yeah, hopefully that shed some light on some AR stuff for people. And like I said, we've got tons and tons of episode intel. We've been writing about AR platform for a long time. I've done videos on how to completely build one from the ground up. So definitely check those out. We'll link to those. Those are on YouTube for everybody to watch free of charge. So definitely check them out. And hope you like the show. Thanks for listening to Gear Tasting Radio. Hope you enjoy the episode again. And as always, use the pound tag Gear Tasting on any social media network. If you have questions, we typically will answer them either here or the Gear Tasting on the videos. So we try to get them answered. Sometimes we don't always get to them because we run long with topics that we're very interested in, so apologize. But if you like what we're doing, please consider supporting us on Patreon. It's patreon.com/ITSTactical. And also you can get all of that episode intel and the link to that Patreon channel in the notes from our show, which are on itstactical.com. We feature every new episode on there, and iTunes features our episodes every Tuesday. So check us out on Apple Podcasts. If you are, I got to get used to that. They now changed over to Apple Podcasts.
It's weird.
I'm trying not to say iTunes anymore. But anyway, you can get on iTunes and actually rate and review us, and I'm pretty sure that's the app you still open.
Yeah, pretty sure. So if I had to tell you to open an app, iTunes.
I would say iTunes.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening.